Hey, Human Geography. Hope everybody's doing well. Yesterday we looked at challenges that farmers in MDCs face, and I'll review that on the throwback. I know this concept of subsidies is kind of a challenging one. I'm not sure I'm doing a great job of teaching it, but hopefully I'll be able to smooth out some questions. And obviously shoot me an email if you have any more. All right, warm-up questions. Which of the following is a typical practice in growing rice in Asia? Preparing fields with a plow drawn by oxen, flooding the plowed field with water, growing seedlings in a nursery, transplanting seedlings to the flooded field, all of the above. The answer is all of the above. All right, this is kind of how it happens, and it takes an incredible amount of work to farm this way. Is you flood a field. Rice farming takes tons of water, and you have little rice shoots in one paddy. When they get to a certain size, you move them to another paddy, and because they don't have high technology or machines, a lot of the work is done through muscles, in this case, an oxen or an ox. All right, which of the following have aided commercial farmers and MDCs? The rise of sea levels, scientific advances, and the reduction of the need for electronics, ancient irrigation projects, transportation improvements, scientific advancements in electronics, climate change, scientific advances, transportation improvements. Clearly, the only one that has all three advantages is letter D. Transportation, we talked about refrigeration, revolutionizing farming industry. Scientific advancement, this is the green revolution. And electronics are things like tractors on GPSs right now and irrigation systems that are on remote sensors, all of which help farmers grow more food. All right, throwback. Let me take another crack at it. In what ways do subsidies influence the price and production of food in the United States? So let's start with price. Well, let's back up. Let's start with a subsidy. A subsidy is simply a government payment to farmers. Now, when the farmer gets money from their government, that means they can charge a lower price for their food while still making a profit. So subsidies are a way to have artificially cheap food. All right. Now, in some cases, the more acres you plant or the more food you grow, the more money you'll get from the government. And so paradoxically, production goes up as subsidies go up. But then once you have a high supply of something, we know the price of it goes down again. So again, these subsidies artificially lowering the price of food in the United States. And there are really kind of two victims, if you want to see it that way. I don't. Victim might be a strong word. Number one are the taxpayers, right? Those subsidies come from our taxes, and maybe a vegetarian doesn't want to subsidize a meat farmer, right? Secondly, it's farmers and LDCs that are most hurt because they can no longer compete with our farmers because the government makes our food cheaper than their food. So, for example, if there were no subsidies, Mexican corn would be cheaper than American corn. But with the subsidies the government gives our corn farmers, American corn is cheaper than the Mexican corn. So I hope that helps. That little 1-minute video on yesterday's notes I actually think is pretty good in explaining it. All right, we're going to look at challenges to subsistence farmers. All right, and there are many. Let's start just with population. So we know that the vast majority of population growth in the world is happening in LDCs, right? So here's our population going up. Here's the agricultural land. So we got more people, but not a lot of more land. This kind of sounds like Thomas Malthus to me. And the other challenge is international trade. We talked about subsidies and how that damages or harms farmers in LDCs because they can't compete with the rich countries. All right. Just kidding. All right. Here, by the way, the picture is showing different types of rice and where they originated from. Here's part of the problem. And again, we kind of have this paradox that when you're able to grow more food, that leads to more people. That's like one of Mr. Evans' basic equations. But then those more mouths require more food. And so subsistence farmers are simply struggling to keep up with the growing populations. All right, kind of going back to our Malthus, right? Right here is where things get difficult, where we have more people than area to farm. All right, so how do they deal with this challenge? In MDCs, we talked about how fields are left fallow, that farmers actually won't farm a field to let the soil recuperate and to avoid the problems of overproduction. That is a luxury farmers in LDCs don't have. And they, in fact, do the opposite, something called multi-cropping. And that's basically, you'll have several harvests on one field in a year. So here's a rice harvest. They planted the rice, they grew the rice, they're harvesting the rice, and then they're going to do it all over again, in some cases, multiple times per year. And so that puts a ton of stress on the soil and the nutrients in the soil. What this can lead to when you over-farm land, when you deplete the soil of its nutrients, or conversely, when you let your animals eat the trees and the grass on a land, what happens is desertification. And that's basically the process where good land turns into desert. All right. The part of the world where this is most severe is a place called the Sahel. And that's like the strip of land just south of the Sahara Desert in Africa. And the Sahara Desert is actually getting bigger and bigger every year as desertification takes hold in that part of the world. I think I have a map here. Oh, you know what? The map is on Mr. Evans' history. Maybe I'll pull it up for you guys at the end here. All right. So international trade, we talked about as a challenge. It's not all bad, though. And when we looked at economics, I said international trade is much better than self-sufficiency. And so LDCs can generate money by selling crops to MDCs. You'll particularly see this in the wintertime because our winter is the southern hemisphere's summer. And so like apples, for example, or your fruits will often say like product of Chile or a place in South America because that's the time of year they can grow their food. And now with refrigerated shipping, we can get it here. That money can be used to improve agricultural technology. That's a great thing. But there is a downside to it. It's that if you're an LDC and you want to make money by selling food to MDCs, that's great, fine, cool. But the more land you devote to that, the less land you have to grow food for your own people. So this is a tea plantation in Sri Lanka. These are huge plantations. It's cool because they get to sell that and make some money, but at the same time, this land then is not being used to grow the fruits and vegetables to keep their own people happy. So it's what's called a zero-sum game. The more you use for one thing, the less of it you have for another. So the more you use for export, the less you have for your own internal consumption. And so many farmers in LDCs have made what I consider to be a completely rational decision, is that they're going to grow the crops that yield them the most money. And in many instances, those are illegal drug crops. And so if we look at South America, there are farmers for the benefit of themselves and their families, grow coca, which has turned into cocaine. Marijuana has become one of the world's largest Mexico has become one of the world's largest suppliers of marijuana. And there's a place called the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia where opium is grown. This is a U.S. soldier in Afghanistan walking through an opium field. And opium is then turned into heroin. Here's a map of drug flow. What you notice, okay? Red is cocaine trafficking. Originates in South America, flow into the United States and Europe. So we see this flow from LDCs to MDCs. The purple is opium, which then becomes heroin. Here's Afghanistan, again, flowing into the MDCs. The problem here, and it's like you might say, oh, well, we just need to crack down on Colombia and Peru and Afghanistan and Myanmar, and the problem will end. Well, no, it won't end because this is a problem driven by demand. So as long as there's a demand for these drugs in the rich countries of the world, there's going to be a supply of them. And so the only way to really stem this drug flow is to attack the demand that exists in MDCs. It's not fair to blame the poor farmers in the LDCs for this. All right, here's another way of looking at it. Global drug, I know this is a weird looking map, but the arrows go out of the LDCs and are going into the MDCs. All right, again, it's the demand from MDCs that drives this process. So I hope that helps explain some of the challenges that farmers in less developed countries face and some of the ways in which they deal with those challenges. Our work today is on Mr. Evans' history. You know what? Let me see. Let me go there right now because I just want to show you this map of desertification. And this is the map of desertification on the right. It looks kind of small. Let me see if I drag it to my toolbar. My hope is that, there you go. That's how you can get a big version of your map. Drag it to your toolbar. The places in dark brown are at most risk of desertification. This belt right here, that's the Sahel. All right, that's the expansion of the Sahara Desert. The Middle East has huge concerns as the little farmland that they have gets turned into deserts. The Western United States, it's a very dry part of the world. We have no problem in New York, right? We're blessed with lots of rain. But in the West, they have droughts, they have fires, good land is being turned into bad land, which is a big concern for the farmers there. And you can look at Australia, right? Australia is kind of crazy. The whole thing is either the tan is already desert. This is the Great Sandy Desert. And then you see a belt surrounding it of land at risk of becoming desert. So Australia has very little amount of actual farmable land right now. So I hope that's going to help you when you do the Mr. Evans history work. As always, reach out with questions or concerns that you have. Have a great weekend, kiddos. Take care.